Welcome, folks, to your Reality Gurus, your show. We take a commonsensical approach to issues through complex conversation. You know I'm your host, T. Cleve, and check this out. Make sure you check out that youtube.com/Reality Guru show. Consider subscribing. Folks, we got a dope show for you folks today. Let me go ahead and introduce you to the guests. First off, Real Talk, the Black Boy King. What's up with you, champ?
What's good, family? Peace to the 12 tribes, scattered to the four corners of the earth, and all praises to the Most High God of Israel.
Indeed, indeed. And let me go ahead and move over to my man, Della, Blackdollars.Ca. Black Dollars, what's up with you, champ? How you feeling this morning?
Good, I'm good, man. Black power to the family.
Gotcha. So then also, I got my man, Ye. Y'all got to check him out on IG, on Ye's Way. Folks, man, you know how we do this. Let's get right up into the synopsis, man. So listen, man, a couple weeks ago, I had Real Talk on the show when we were getting into the Lost Tribes of Israel. And he gave, within an hour, for me, a really in-depth look into, the history and the whole splitting up. And what did you say, brother? They sent these tribes to the four corners of the earth. And it kind of explained a couple things for me. And one of the key things that you mentioned is that, being that we brought up Pan-Africanism, and, we wanted to have that conversation as far as why Pan-Africanism wasn't successful. And you discussed how the reason is because we are not African. And that was interesting. But before we even go that deep, I have Della here. He said he actually checked out the interview. And there was a couple things that you had mentioned regarding, Ghana and the Ashanti tribe. And he just wanted you to clarify some things. So why don't I go ahead and let you start from there, and then we'll see where this goes. So Real Talk, go ahead and go and get into that for me, please.
No doubt, man. No doubt. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity in this platform to be able to educate and edify. Really, at the end of the day, that's the goal. To, first we have to educate ourselves so we can start thinking on a higher level. Then when we start thinking on a higher level, we can actually start building our kingdom again. So, with that being said, I had mentioned that, my lineage, when I was able to track not only my DNA, but I'll go through the slave records and, find out that my ancestor who arrived here in America, arrived here in 1736 in Jamestown, Virginia, that he was actually brought from the shores of Ghana and was a member of the Ashanti tribe. So I started doing a lot of research into the Ashanti, and then, not only coming into the truth of us being the Israelites, but digging deep into finding out what happened to the Israelite tribes that did flee into Africa in 70 AD. Was able to start putting a lot of the pieces together. So, really from the standpoint of, what I'm going to present about specifically the Ashanti people, we have to do a couple of foundational things real quick so that way the listening audience can understand, where the beginning was at, and then how did we end up down in the area known today as modern day Ghana, and what was the birthplace of the Ashanti people. So, when we're talking about the Israelites, a lot of people probably don't understand or aware what the movement is about right now. But at the end of the day, we have to establish who the real Jews are. So the real the people who are in the land of Israel today that are claiming to be Jews are actually Caucasian people that come from the Khazarian Empire. And this Khazarian Empire is with a K, Khazarian. And that's an empire of the Ukraine or the Caucasus Mountains that was established around 500 AD. And they were a very warlike tribe of people that were very distinct from the other Caucasian people that were in Western Europe and other parts of Eastern Europe. These Caucasian people inhabited the land after the Crusades, after our kingdom was destroyed and we fled into Africa. The land of Israel was left desolate, just as the Bible said it would be. And those people came in and occupied that land. Now, during the time of the Crusades, you had the Catholics and the Christians, which was a Roman religion based off of the scriptures that is the telling of our people. So when you think about the Bible, The Bible is not a religious book. The Bible is a history book, a prophecy book, and a book of law. In addition to that, it's a lineage book that covers 44 kings that we had in our nation. We had 44 kings, 45 kings if you count the civil war that happened when King David brought the kingdom back together again, which is why King David is heralded as the highest king, because during our civil war, he brought us together. 46 if you count Jesus, but Jesus never actually got a chance to take the throne because he was killed by the Romans. So with that being said, it was destroyed. We fled into Africa. Those people took over the land. You had the Muslims, and you had the Christians, and you had the Catholics who were all fighting for the Holy Land. The Khazarians decided they didn't want to get involved with any of the side of that fight. So when they read the Hebrew scriptures and they knew that those people were no longer in the land anymore, they adopted that culture and said, we are these people, we're the chosen people. So since around 500 AD, but realistically in the Western world, about 1500 AD, these Khazarian people have occupied the land. Now, when you look at the actual lineage of these people, according to the Bible and the family tree, these people tell you exactly who they are. They call themselves Ashkenazi Jews. And so when you say, okay, Ashkenazi, usually a suffix of that ends in an I, and I'll touch on it with the Ashanti later on, that usually means children of or sons of Ashkenaz. So who is Ashkenaz? We go into the Bible, in Genesis chapter 10, verses 1 through 3, it lays out exactly who Ashkenaz is. And they're the sons of Gomer, who was the son of Japheth. Japheth was one of the 3 sons that was left over from Noah after the flood was over and was given certain parts of the earth. So you had Shem was given the Middle East and Israel. Ham was the progenitor of the Africans who was given the land of Africa. And Japheth was the progenitor of the people that covered the European continent territory. North and South America were not listed as places that people would go just yet. For thousands of years later, that place is called Arsareth in the Bible. So we know that these people are Caucasian people from a Khazarian empire who occupy the land and have no bloodline descendancy back to Abraham. So basically, they're imposter people calling themselves Jews. And Jesus told us this in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, that he knows who we are and he understands the poverty and tribulation that we going through. And he knows that there's people in the future that are calling themselves Jews but aren't, but are lying. But he said at the end time, when the recompense comes, he will make those people acknowledge and bow down to us because he loved us. He was our king, right? So we know those are the Jews. Those aren't the Jews. So the Jews, who are the Jews? The Jews are the people who suffer the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28. They were the people that the Most High God of Abraham freed from Egyptian slavery. And we are the people that got scattered and lost our kingdom and homeland due to our ancestors' disobedience to the laws that we were supposed to live and civilize the world to adhere to. And so specifically when you read Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 15 through 68, those curses are identifiers. The Lord says that these will be a sign on you, a sign of who you are as a people forever. And several of the different curses, they line up with some people. But all of the curses line up with only one people, and that's the people who went into the transatlantic slave trade and had their heritage stripped from them and had another people's identity planted back on them, and they forgot who they were. Though we fit every last one of those curses in the book, especially Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68, where the Lord says specifically, he will send you into bondage again, but this time using ships, and no man will be able to save you. No man will be able to redeem you. And so we've had this cycle of, we had Martin Luther King, we had Malcolm X, we had Marcus Garvey, we had the Black Panthers, we had all these different, even Barack Obama, we had a black president. And when you look at Barack Obama's presidency, we had the highest black unemployment. We had Chicago, more murders in Chicago than Iraq. So not even a black president could save us. And that's why God is telling you, I'm the one doing this to you. And this is a sign on you for a time until you've learned your punishment and we get redeemed as a people. So kind of more or less bringing non-biblical facts to back up the claim that these people are not the Jews. They tell you themselves in 2 books specifically. The first book is The 13th Tribe, written by Arthur Koestler, spelled Koessler. He was actually killed along with his wife for releasing this book in the 1970s. where he actually goes through the lineage of the Khazarian Empire. And he himself is a Khazarian Jew. So he's basically telling on his own people that they aren't the real people. And he gives the lineage, the location, the historical artifacts of the Khazarian people and how they wound up being called the quote unquote Jewish people. And so the second book is a newer, more contemporary book that really just came out in the 2000s called The Invention of the Jewish People by Shlomo Sands. So Schlomo Sands, like sands of the sea. Mm-hmm. And in that book, he claims, again, re-establishing what Arthur Koestler said, but bringing new information to the table about them not being the real people and having no bloodline ancestries back to Abraham, and that they're occupying that land. And he points out several things that I've already pointed out, because again, if you haven't read the full volume of the Bible, you won't know. What Christianity has done is they cherry pick certain pieces of the Bible and created a religion around it. So most people have read the Bible, they've read bits and pieces of the Bible, and then they claim to say, I know the Bible. They haven't read it line by line, page by page, and done the research to actually study it. What these people have, because they're the ones claiming to be the Jews. So they would know more than anybody else what's right and what's wrong, because they got to keep up with the lie continuously. And so this man wrote a book, and he was highly condemned by his own people, called The Invention of the Jewish People. And he points out that, again, the suffix ish means to be like something, not to be the original. So if you say, I'm going to be at your house, G, at 2-ish, I might be there at 2:05, I might be there at 2:10. I'm not going to be there at 2 o'clock, though, meaning I'm not going to be on the time that you need me to be there. So when you say I'm Jewish, meaning they are like the Jewish people, meaning they're practicing the laws, statutes, and commandments. They're wearing the garments. They're doing the culture, but they're not the real people. It's a generic version of the original. Mm-hmm. And so just kind of going back on that, him being condemned from his own community, having being basically a political pariah in his own Israeli community because he wrote this book. Earlier than that, though, we find even earlier historical books written on it where they're basically telling on themselves. The Jewish Almanac, printed in 1980, on page 3, states specifically, and I quote, "Strictly speaking, it is incorrect to call an ancient Israelite a contemporary Jew, or a contemporary Jew a Hebrew." So that's basically them telling you that it's foolish to call a modern Jew a Hebrew or an ancient Israelite a modern Jew, because they're not the same people. And in 1925, the Jewish Encyclopedia, the 5th edition, on page 41 is quoted, "Edom is modern Jewry." So if you know who Edom is in the Bible, you'll know that Edom is the birthplace of the quote-unquote Caucasian people. They come from the nation of Edom, which was the old nation of Petra, which is in Jordan, which I've been to Jordan. I've seen Petra. I've seen the ruins. I climbed down into the mountains, into the canyon, and went and saw it. I kicked it with the Bedouin tribesmen that lived down there. So I seen it. And that's the ancient capital of the original Caucasian empire, called the Empire of Edom. So they're basically telling you, like, we're not the real people. We're these people. This is where we come from. And then another Khazarian Jew named Stephen Jacobs, he wrote a book called The Hebrew Heritage of Black America. And in that book, I quote, says, "Black Americans are now in a position as never before in modern history to rediscover and claim, if they wish to, a heritage that has profoundly influenced world history and mankind, which is the Hebrew heritage of Black Africa." So that's them basically telling you, you are the people, we're not the people. And if you choose to, you can go and research this now, because we're now presenting this information to you. Mm-hmm. In 1952, this is shortly after the Balfour Declaration, which England awarded the Khazarian bankers, the Rothschild family, were awarded the land of Israel after World War II, because the Rothschild family gave America and Britain the money to defeat Hitler in World War II. In exchange for that money and that funding from their Federal Reserve Bank, they signed the Balfour Declaration, basically granting the land of Palestine to these Israeli people in 1948. In 1952, an Arab president named Gamal Abdel Nasser, he's the Egyptian president, in Time magazine. So you have Time magazine, a famous publication. You have a world leader, the Egyptian president. So it's not some cat off the streets. This is the Egyptian president in 1952, in a time period where they felt like Black folks couldn't even read. So we would never even read Time magazine to figure this out. But he's quoted in that magazine saying, the Europeans claiming to be Jews are nothing more than Hebrew-speaking Gentiles, and they will never be able to live here in peace because the Jews left here black, but came back white. So here is this man saying that these fake people are not going to live here in peace because the real Jews left black and went into Africa, and y'all are white people coming back here saying you're Jews. And if you look at the situation in the Middle East today, there has never been peace in the Middle East since the 50s. Since these fake Khazarian people actually said Israel is their country in 1948 during the Balfour Declaration, it's been terrorism, bombings, things like that. And they, you know, the Western media claims just because, oh, they don't like freedom, they don't like democracy. Christians like to believe it's because they hate Christians. Nah, fam. At the end of the day, it's because they know, and I've been over there and I've talked to them face to face, and I've seen it out their own mouth. They know they're not the real people and they want them off the land. So they have a term for that over there. The Palestinians call it the Nakba. You could look this up. It's called the Nakba, N-A-Q-B-A. And that's the anniversary of when the fake Jews took over the land and confirming the prophecy of Jesus, the Messiah, in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. They call it the Nakba. Every year they celebrate the Nakba by throwing those rocks and protesting in the streets and causing chaos and havoc. And you see on the news the Israeli soldiers shooting them with fire hoses and all sorts of smoke bombs, and all the rioting over there is because they know they're not the real people and they want them gone. And they're begging us to wake up over here in the West to who our heritage is, so we can return back to the land and back to our heritage and set the world straight. And so I just wanted to set that foundation that the people that are Jews over there now are not the Jews. And the biggest bombshell for me was because I'm a big historian. Adolf Hitler himself, and I'm no Hitler supporter. Hitler was a piece of garbage, right? He killed a lot of people. He got his special place in the lake of fire. But at the end of the day, if he's telling you, you have to take what he's saying into consideration. And there's a book called The Nazis World War II. And in that book, he is quoted as saying to one of his soldiers during a major meeting about the end of World War II. So he's in his bunker. It's the end of World War II. He's about to lose the war. The Russians and the Americans and the British are closing in on Berlin, and he's in this bunker. And he's talking to one of his soldiers who survived this ordeal and documented it down. And this book is old. It's called Nazis World War II, for you guys to look it up. Adolf Hitler is quoted in this book saying, "Because the white Jews know that the Negroes are the real children of Israel, and to keep America secret, the Jews will blackmail America. The Jews will extort America, and their plan for world domination will not work if the Negroes know who they are. The white citizens of America will be terrified to know that all this time they have mistreated and discriminated and lynched the children of Israel. And they will fear God will destroy them as he destroyed Egypt for doing the same thing. So the elite will keep this secret at all costs." And this is in reference to the 1948 Balfour Agreement and the Jewish control of banking and media. So I just wanted to drop those facts, you know what I'm saying, as far as who are not the Jews and who are the Jews. There's many different biblical scriptures that I could drop, you know what I mean, for us to look at. I'll just name them off real quick, and people can write them down and go into the Bible themselves and take a look. But we have Genesis chapter 15, verse 13, where God tells Abraham that his people will be a stranger in a land that is not theirs and will serve them, and those people will afflict them 400 years. Now, we know that that's not talking about Egypt, because us as Israelites were in Egypt for 430 years, and we were only in slavery in Egypt for 120 years. And Egypt was not a land that we did not know. We dwelt in the land of Canaan, which was northeast of Egypt, which is the modern day land of Israel. And we went back and forth into Egypt several different times over the course of thousands of years. Whenever there was a famine in our land, we would go to Egypt because Egypt's economy was robust. And when we went down into Egypt for the last time, which was during the times of Joseph, Egypt was going through a tough time, and Joseph, because he was able to free himself from prison and make good light with the Pharaoh, he was able to save the Egyptian empire by having, and the story is told in the Bible, and it was documented in Egyptian artifacts, the 7 years of famine and the 7 years of plentiful. And so during the 7 years of plentiful, Joseph was able to advise Pharaoh and say, this is what you need to do to save this amount of grain, this amount of resources for that 7 years of famine. And after the 7 years of famine was over, Joseph was held as a success, and the Israelites were raised up in stature in the Egyptian community. It wasn't until Pharaoh Ramses II came into power when he realized that the Israelite bloodline was outnumbering the native Black African bloodline in Egypt, and made measures in order to squash that level of growth and wealth that the Israelites were attaining within the Egyptian empire. And that's when he sent us into slavery for those 120 years. And during that 120-year time frame, we forgot who we were. We were stripped of our wealth. We were stripped of our power. We were stripped of our heritage. And we were subject to servitude to Egyptian culture and Egyptian heritage. So that's the distinction difference between the 400-year Egypt story, which is not true, not accurate, versus 400 years that started here in America in 1619 that we're witnessing the ending of in 2019 as more brothers and sisters are waking up to this truth. And we're about to free ourselves from the American stronghold, which is quote unquote New Egypt. And all you got to do is look at the back of your dollar bill. There's a pyramid on the back of your dollar bill. You really ask yourself, why is there an Egyptian pyramid on the back of our dollar bill? Why does the eagle on the back of the dollar bill in the same exact shape as the eagle used in ancient Egypt that's holding up the sun disk? It's the same symbolism, because Egypt, their philosophies and their ways of doing things, the founding fathers of America heavily adopted into the American culture, along with Roman culture, Greek culture, as well as Islamic culture. As much as they want to bag on Islam, a lot of American doctrine is based on Islamic culture. So that's just one scripture, but there's Luke 21:24, Deuteronomy 28:36, Deuteronomy 28:49, Deuteronomy 28:68, describing the Israelites as Black, Daniel 10:6, Daniel 7:9, Jesus himself being a Black man with woolly hair, Revelation 1:13 through 15, King Solomon saying he is Black as the tents of Kedar, Song of Solomon 1:15. All you gotta do is Google tents of Kedar, and a picture of black tents, as black as my shirt, your shirt, come up. So if Solomon is saying I'm as black as them tents, he's not no white boy. So that's him saying the king of the Israelites, King Solomon, the richest king in history, more wealth beyond measure, beyond Mansa Musa. If King Solomon woke up with Mansa Musa's money, he jumped off a cliff. That's how rich King Solomon was. And it's described not only in the histories of Josephus, but it's also described in the annals of ancient Rome, and it's described in the Bible. So to refute this is to say that the Romans are wrong and that the greatest ancient historian to ever exist in Josephus is wrong. And so that's why I say if people are not well read on the topic, if you haven't read the annals of ancient Rome and actually seen the documentation of ancient Roman emperors describing what they've seen on their travels, and you haven't read the writings of Plato, and you haven't read the writings of any of these other people from ancient history that are separate from the Bible, then you're basically saying the Roman Empire didn't exist and the Greek Empire didn't exist and the Babylonian Empire didn't exist, right? So that's what I'm setting the foundation here, is that it's obvious that the white people that are saying they're Jews are not Jews, and that ancient artifacts, history, and documentation say that the ancient Jews are Black. So with that being said, what happened to the Jews? So we know that they were destroyed. They were sent into Africa. They fled down into places that were comfortable going, like Egypt, Nubia, into the areas of the Congo, where they know that the people looked like them, and the white Greeks and Europeans who had dominated that landscape for almost 1,000 years, when they're chasing them into that territory, they wouldn't be able to tell them apart without actually doing some extensive investigative work. And so the Romans weren't up for that. They didn't have the money to do it. They didn't have the time, and their own empire back at home in Rome was crumbling under political discourse, the same way America is right now. America is trying to be in all these other countries' business, but Trump is destroying their own country from within right now. So we're witnessing this cycle of history keep going and going. So when we went into Africa, we were melding in with these native African people who already lived there. Those native Africans are the sons of Ham. Now, you'll see, I believe I sent you the picture, and you can put it up. It's the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, which is this book right here. This is the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. So this is white scholars. This is a dictionary of white scholars. No Black man wrote this book. This book's been around for over 150 years. And in this book, the description of Ham is listed as the progenitor of the dark races, Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Libyans, and the Canaanites, but not the Negroes. It specifically delineates the difference between the Black races versus the actual Negroes. So when you read that, you say, okay, this white man 150 years ago is making a grave distinction between the Negro people and the Black African. Who are the Negro people? They have to be somebody else, somebody completely different. It's entirely separate. And so this book explains that the lineage of the Negro people are the lineage of Shem. Shem is the father of Noah, or I'm sorry, Shem is the son of Noah and is the father of Isaac and Jacob. The Israelites, 12 tribes spread from the loins of Jacob. So they're basically telling you in the history books right here in a dictionary that anybody can pick up. I bought this on Amazon for like $10. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles or Borders, wherever you shop at. And it's saying right here, Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born 96 years before the flood, he became the genetic progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. So now that we know that from a historical perspective, who came up with all this race identity, right? Like thousands of years, nobody ever said, I'm a Black person, I'm a white person, I'm a yellow person, I'm a brown skinned person. These are all new philosophies and new ideals that came up post the slavery paradigm of 1619. And they're basically, the idea of races come from the continent of Africa being named after a Roman general named Scipio Africanus, and America being named after the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci. So you cannot technically be named after a continent and two white men. And so the idea of Black, white, Asian, etc. comes from a German Ashkenazi Jew named Johann Blumenbach. And Johann Blumenbach lived from 1752 to 1840. And he was a very big bigot. This man was extremely bigoted towards the other races and nationalities of people on the planet. And he divided the people of the earth up by skin color line, and he created what is called the 5 chief races. These ideals were used to create Nazism in the 1930s and develop the Ku Klux Klan ideologies in the 1870s. And it was finalized in a 1931 book called Race Psychology. And the 5 chief races are Caucasian, Malaysian, Ethiopian, American, and Mongolian. And so that's kind of where we get this Black-white paradigm from. When someone says, I'm Black or I'm white, basically lumping everybody from thousands of different racial identities and cultures into one crayon color or paint color, which is really just something that they put on a chart to put you in. That's why when you apply for a job, you got to check, I'm Black, I'm white. They basically have taken the thousands of years of your lineage and heritage, your kingdom, your culture, and your army, navy, battles, warfare, and put it into a color on a check mark on a box. And that comes from this man, Johann Blumenbach, in the 1700s. So, when it comes to who we are as far as the Ashanti, I just wanted to set that backdrop so that way we know, okay, Negroes are not the same as Africans. It's documented, it's been proven by DNA and historical fact, artifacts, scholarly books by the enemy and by us. So we know that. Okay, so who are we specifically? So my DNA and my history lineage goes back to the Ashanti. And so what I want to read now, and you can put the picture up during the broadcast, is directly from the king of the Ashanti's mouth. So this is the king of the Ashanti. His name is King Primpa II. I know I'm butchering these African names. I'm trying to get the language down, but as long as I spell it right, we are right. And it's King of the Ashanti. It's spelled Prempa II, also known as Atumfu Nana Ose Tut Agwayan Prempe II. And he lived from 1892 to 1970. And he was the 14th Asatehene, or king of the Ashanti of the Akan, and he reigned from 1931 to 1970 at his death. And in 1946, and again, anybody could look this up. You go to the book and to the documentation in the Ashanti history. If you want to travel to Ghana, you know what I mean? My rib was in Ghana last year, seeing the people and all this herself. So he is quoted in his own speech given to the Ashanti people in 1946, and his royal commentaries is in the Manahia Palace in Kumasi, Ghana. He says, and I quote, "This last work about the migrations of the ancient Ashantis to the Gold Coast is a finish to the works so long delayed. It is fitting to go back to the earliest times. I know it true to be the fact that in ancient past, Ashanti people lived in Jerusalem and removed little by little to live again in Egypt, then to hear. When I talked to you of it, it was said that it was the fact that it was our noble families of the Ashanti who traveled from far, but the rest of the people were natives, such as the Dankira, Akim, Tekyaman, and etc. This could be for nobility even up to the present day, as the nobility are the lighter brown born, even when the general Ashantis are dark black. I am of the firm opinion that nothing good can come in these times by saying that some Ashantis are better than others because they are descended from those who long since came here from the Northeast in Israel. So this is directly from the king of the Ashantis' mouth in 1946, that the ancient Ashantis left Israel and Jerusalem, went through Africa, through the Sahara Desert, down into the Gold Coast to settle. And so when you look at the origins of the Ashanti, the oral traditions of the ruling Aduina or Abrade clan tell that they originated from north of Egypt. So we know north of Egypt is Israel. They went through Egypt and settled in Nubia. And in 500 AD, due to the expansion of the Aksumite Ethiopian Empire, which you can go to Aksum, Ethiopia today and see the ancient ruins in Ethiopia of the Aksumite Empire. Very beautiful site. I guarantee if you go and visit Ethiopia, you will not be disappointed with the actual artifacts and the ancient structures that you see. I mean, they have a temple that's built in the ground, and you wonder how the heck did these African people do that? But then you got to erase that brainwashing that, you know, again, African brothers, they're not the same DNA as us. They had their own empire. They had their own stuff. So during the expansion of the Aksumite Ethiopian Empire, Nubia was shattered and the Akon of Ashanti moved west. And in 750 AD, the Empire of Ghana was formed. And that empire lasted until the Muslim invasion of 1200 AD. And the Ashanti migrated to the Ivory Coast region. This movement was to find better land as they were not used to the forest and jungle life. Again, because Israel being more of a dry climate like America for the most part, it's not like the jungle. We say we're a tropical people, but in reality, we're not. We're from that desertous kind of arid region. The Ashanti migrated to the Ivory Coast. The movement was to find better land as they were not used to the forest life. And this is also confirmed by a woman named Christiana Oware Knudsen. And she's a doctor. She has a PhD. And she wrote a book called The Theologian Slave Trader. And this is referenced on page 27 of that book. Dorothy Thompson, who was a white woman, she wrote a book called Memphis Under the Ptolemies. And so this was printed by Princeton University Press. And she is basically, we know that the Ptolemies were the Egyptian pharaohs that became more Greek. They adopted Greek culture because Alexander the Great conquered Egypt during his reign. And when he died, his empire split into many different regions based on his generals who ruled under him. So you had the Ptolemaic Empire, which was the west in Egypt. And then you had the Seleucid Empire, which was the east, which covered Israel. Israel was ruled over by a man named Antiochus Epiphanes, who's referenced in the Bible in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. And that's a great story if you want to learn about how our brothers and sisters banded together and actually defeated the Greek army and threw them out. In that story, it talks about how they had a great disdain for our black skin in Israel and how they committed mass atrocities against us because of our black skin. And they couldn't believe that the God of Israel, who freed us from Egypt, would do so for our black skinned people, because they worshiped the different gods that they worshiped, and their gods weren't on the level as the God of Abraham, didn't have the same power. So you know that the Ptolemaic pharaohs were of these so-called Caucasian skin color. So the dynasties of the black African pharaohs had already died out and fell after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. So in her book, again, Princeton University Press, this is not some, garage sale, jackleg, dude in his house printing up a book. This is Princeton University. She states that the Jewish migration into Africa through Egypt occurred heavily due to the warfare amongst the neighboring kingdoms and the fall of the Israelite reign. The economies of Egypt and Nubia were prime, and Israelites migrated throughout, even against the prophet Jeremiah's warning in Jeremiah chapter 42, verses 13 and 14. These immigrants were idolatrous and worshipped the Queen of Heaven, aka Isis, Semiramis, Hathor, and Ma'at, against King Josiah of Judah's commands in 1622. So she's referencing a story in the Bible in 1st and 2nd Kings when one of our 45 kings, King Josiah of Judah, in 622 BC, he actually came back to the law of Moses. He witnessed how the other kings weren't following the law of Moses and how the kingdom was steadily declining. And he was reading the histories and he said, man, what happened to our people? We need to get back to this level. So he commanded the entire kingdom to get back to the laws and commandments, which means he had to go and throw down a lot of the idolatry that was going on and the worship of other gods during that time frame.
Real talk. Hold on 1 second, brother. Give me 1 second.
No doubt.
Folks, youtube.com/RealTalk show. We here with Real Talk, the Black Boy King, and Black Dollars. It seems like Real Talk. I'll let him go ahead and give a real in-depth, because if you didn't see the previous video, the interview we did, when he went in as far as the background and the history of the lost tribes of Israel, I wanted to give him an opportunity to go ahead and put that information out there. But now, if you just give me a second, let me jump over here to Black Dollars for a second. You hear what's going on. You hear the information that he's put out, a lot of information. Yes. Once he mentioned the Ashanti tribe and, went into Ghana, and I figured that this is the area where you wanted to have some clarification. So how do you feel about the information you heard so far?
Well, the Ashanti tribe is not what I actually wanted to have the clarification on, but like everything I've heard so far, let me just say this, like as a Pan-Africanist, it's not our job to dictate what religion people want to practice. If you want to be a Christian, if you want to be a Muslim, if you want to be a Hebrew, it's not our job to tell you, no, that's not the case. Because in actuality, all religions originated from Africa. Like Dr. Ben says it, Dr. John Henry Clark says it. All religions did come from Africa. I see Real Black Boy King shaking his head, but that's the truth though, because
they're all Abrahamic religions. Abraham was a Hebrew from the Middle East. He dwelt in Mesopotamia, so you can't say that. Yeah. Islam is an Abrahamic religion. I'm just saying, being a Hebrew is not a religion. It's a race of people. So
okay, hold on. I feel you. That's okay. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? My bad. Go
ahead. Okay, Della, so go ahead. Finish exactly, explain exactly where you want the clarification. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear it still. But like I was saying, because what we want to do as Pan-Africanists, we want to unite as much as possible. We don't want to divide over religion.
Right.
So one of the things, like he was saying, that I do agree with is that the European Jews are not the original Jews. They are total frauds. They're completely appropriating the religion 100%. There's one thing that he said about the continent of Africa being named after a Roman general. That is 100% false. He was not born with that name, Africanus. He named himself Africanus after he thought he took over all of Africa after defeating Hannibal, but he was not born with that name. His children were not given that name except for a daughter of his. But like, if that was his lineage, then it would have went down to all of his children, which it did not. That was just a nickname, so that is 100% false. But I wanted to
the land is called Africa after him.
No, it's not. It wasn't called. It's not. He named himself after Africa. That's how it was. It was a nickname. It was not his birth name. So
that's what I'm saying. It was still associated with him, though, and we call it that today.
After he defeated Hannibal, what I'm trying to tell you is that if he was not born with that name, how did he name the whole landmass Africa? That's what I'm trying to say.
Because that definition comes from a completely different place. Prior to him being there, and Hannibal of Carthage, who ruled in that area and fought against the Romans, the land was not called Africa. It was in the Hebrew tongue. It's called the land of Ham. Just like Egypt is called Mizraim, but the actual ancient Egyptians called it Kemet. They called it the land of Kemet, but they don't call it Egypt. The Greeks called it Egypt. Everybody's calling it something different based on their own tongue.
I hear what you're saying. You could go check on YouTube. There's a video that explains the actual name of Africa, which is Afrika, Afrika. You can see the Ra meaning God in that name, and then the Ka meaning life force. So meaning,
but nobody called it that. The ancient writings, the Greeks called it Ethiopia.
Hold on.
That comes from Egypt, Africa, what I just mentioned. So you could go type that in onto YouTube. You can find a couple videos on it, and it's going to explain the exact definition of Africa, Afrika. So The whole thing that we like Europeans name Africa, 100% false, 100% false. So I just wanted to clarify that. Like I said, the European Jews, like the way Hebrew Israelites bang on the European Jews, I'm all for that 100% because they are not the original Jews at all. Um, like the last episode, you're talking about the hold on, you're talking about the E1B1A DNA being different from Africans, which is false as well, because the E1B1 DNA derives from the E1B1, which originates from Africa. There's also a map that you can see online that shows how E1B1 DNA stretched out from Africa into the
Right.
Middle East and different
The E1B1A is separate from the
it's not.
E1B1.
It's not separate. It's not separate. That's what I'm trying to say. People could go do their research, but I'm telling you,
I already have. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so hold.
okay, cool. We can let the people do the research, but I'm letting people know that E1B1A derives from the E1B1, which originates out of Africa. There's a map that you could go see, and
right.
I just don't
the Most High said He separated us from the nations in Deuteronomy chapter 7. He says He chose us to be separate from the rest of the people. So
I hear what you're saying.
E1B1 DNA haplogroup starts in Africa and then it springs out to the other nations of people. The E1B1A is separated from that. That's my entire point.
E1B1A is the son of the E1B1. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Like the son cannot separate itself from the father. That's 100% impossible. In the last episode, I don't know how you could tell people that you did a DNA test and your DNA would trace back to West Africa, but then by the end of the episode, you're telling people that you guys are not African. Like that just doesn't make sense. Like if you want to bring science into it, you have to bring the whole science into it. And
well, first of all, a modern day DNA test can only go back about 1,500 years to 1,000 to 1,500 years. So when you're talking about 1,000 to 1,500 years, you're talking about the era of 500 BC. So that's why I'm bringing this out about the Ashanti people migrating from 70 AD, which was 2,000 years ago, down into West Africa. So my DNA was split into two different distinct pools. The first one was West Africa and Ghana. 65% of my lineage is from there. 35% of my lineage is directly native to the island of Great Britain. And that's why, I was showing you those pictures of the ancient royal Israelites who were black Negro people from the Jacobian bloodline. Right. Why? Because when Israel was destroyed, millions of us went north into Europe and millions of us went south into Africa. So considering the fact that a DNA test can only go back 1,000 to 15 years with modern technology, based on the historical documentation and facts, as well as the Library of Congress records showing my slave my slave ancestor being purchased in 1736 directly from the Ashanti tribe in the ports of Ghana, the conclusion is, again, 1 + 1 = 2, is that my people come from the Ashanti lineage who go back to the Israelites of Israel who were scattered in 70 AD when, at the order of Roman Emperor Vespasian, the Romans came in and conquered and destroyed the land of Israel. So that's where my lineage comes from. So anybody can go and do their own DNA research and find out that they come from one of several different other Israelite tribes who became Africans, like the Ibo and some of the other ones I mentioned. The Ethiopian Falashas.
Okay, fellas, hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Folks, YouTube.com/reality guru show. We are here with Real Talk, Black Boy King, and Blackdollars.Ca, my man Della. Real good information coming out here. But what I want to know, Della, what is it specifically that you had the problem with when we're talking about okay, so if Real Talk is saying that these lost tribes of Israel, they're not African, and you said that he referenced in the last video at the end how we let me see how I got that correct. You said that we were African and then we weren't African, and it seems like there was
his DNA.
Let me say it, since I'm the one that said it.
Mm-hmm.
The families in the family tree were split up post-flood. So you had certain group of people who became the progenitors, the dark-skinned people who became progenitors of the native Africans who lived in Africa. And they had their own empires, they had their own kingdoms, they had their own time to rule, which is very ancient, is very magnificent. I'm not taking nothing away from those African people. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is that Our people who went on those slave ships and had the whips put on our backs and get called nigger to this day. We get called black. We get called African American. We get called spick, coon, monkey, all these other different things, but the actual children of Israel of who we are, we fit the certain description of the people in this book called the Bible, which is a historical documentation of a kingdom that existed thousands of years ago. And that is what I'm saying, is that we are a distinctly different type of black person. The same way you would approach an Asian man and you would tell a Chinese man got thousands of years of his own history that's different and separate from a Japanese man, a Korean man, a Vietnamese man, a Filipino man, and a Thailand person. It's all different. Cambodians don't run around claiming that they're Pan-Asianists. That don't exist. Cambodian people got their own history, their own DNA, their own people. And that's us. So it's different. It's completely different. And I'm not trying to convince anybody. The facts and documentation is there. And if you want to research it and you want to be able to accept this facts, you can. But if you don't, you don't have to. But what's for certain is going to happen, the same way that the Bible prophesied we go in them ships and we did, you're going to be watching when all these biblical events start taking place and our second exodus up out of Babylon the Great, aka America, happens, and we get up out of here and get our kingdom back. So that's really what it's about, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not Real Talk telling you this. This is historical documentation by white people telling you this. It's historical documentation by black scholars telling you this from hundreds of years ago. And on top of it, it's the own king of the Ashanti telling you this. So if you ain't gonna believe me, that's cool, right? You don't want to believe the Israelite community, that's cool. I feel you. You don't have to believe me. We don't know each other, right? But if you don't want to listen to the actual king of these people who ruled over these people, who was responsible for the livelihood of millions of people of his tribe and would know his own people's history more than me or any of us combined, then that's a decision that you're personally. Because at the end of the day, the facts are there. This man said out of his own mouth to his own, they dwelt in Jerusalem, and that there was a group of Ashantis that were descended from these people that fled into Africa. I've got several other books that's backing it up.
Go ahead.
From the 1600s.
I hear all that. My problem is that Hebrew Israelites are trying so hard to take their history and make it separate from African history. But in actuality,
well, I'm not doing that. I'm saying we have our own. I'm saying we dwelt in Africa, but we're not African people. We're two different people.
Let me stop. Hold on, Della, Bible. Okay, let me stop the conversation there, because that's really what I want to open up. Because when we think about the Pan-Africanism conversation, and it's about, we're all African. If your argument is we're not, my question is, let me do this. How about this? Let me ask Real Talk that question, since he's the one that's suggesting that, because of the lost tribes and they're not African. Let me ask him that question. Why didn't Pan-Africanism work?
Pan-Africanism didn't work for two reasons. The first one I'm going to give you is non-biblical. So the non-biblical answer to that is because, again, like we talked about on the show, you have a continent of 3,000 plus different quote unquote races of people, languages, cultures, kingdoms, and empires that are distinctly different from one another, that have different agendas, different livelihoods, different rules of conduct. And so to ask them to put aside their thousands of years of history to align themselves with another culture is asking them to pretty much erase who they are as a people.
We're not telling people to do that. That's not what
I'm saying. But my point is also is that it comes from a lack of understanding on the global construct on who is in charge of this world and how things are set up to rule. Going back to, again, my example of the Asian people, Chinese people and Koreans, they warred against each other for centuries. They have no discussions whatsoever in thousands of years of Asian history to talk about becoming one nation of Asia. Mongolian people under Genghis Khan killed millions and millions of Chinese people and South, quote unquote, Siam people when it was the nation of Siam, when Thailand and Cambodia and Laos were under one kingdom. They warred against each other constantly. There was no talk about them being one Asia. Quote unquote, American, Western, black people are the only people on this entire planet that are promoting this pro-black African agenda because it comes from a lack of understanding on the global construct of power, nationhood, and kingdomhood. For over 400 years, the enemy has placed us under their paradigm and has given us their lessons and their identity for us to learn like scraps from a table. And so we are constantly operating at a childlike mentality, thinking that someday there will be peace, not understanding that we are dealing with rulerships, kingdoms, and empires. Just like the television show Game of Thrones is a fictionalized version of what is really happening in the world. So there will never be any African unity, no matter what anybody will say. Because at the end of the day, all of those world leaders who may put forth programs and initiatives have to answer to one family. And that is the ruling power on the throne of England, Queen Elizabeth, and her financial counterparts, the Rothschild family, who have been dominating this planet since the time of the Inquisition. And that's the reality of it. That's a non-biblical answer.
Right,
so Della, yeah, I got you. So Della, knowing that you are a Pan-Africanist, man, practicing it, you are an organizer, the AAPRP, and you're hearing what Black Boy King is saying right now. How do you respond to that?
Well, basically, like, Pan-Africanism never went away. It's still going on to this day. Like I said in my the last episode, we're just not in the era of Pan-Africanism in the leadership position. So I'm talking about the time of Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, Sekou Touré. Those were our Pan-African leaders, but they're not here anymore. So what does Pan-African mean today? It means the masses rising up and electing our leaders now. So that part of Pan-Africanism is actually inspired by what Marcus Garvey did, how he had chapters all over the world. So it's up to us to take the political education, raise our consciousness, and it doesn't matter what religion, what nationality we are, we could all unify ourselves around political education, which is the bottom line. So that's
not gonna happen.
Hold on for a second.
It's not
happen. That's all good. That's all.
It's not gonna happen because those politicians you mentioned are put in their seats by the Rothschilds and Queen Elizabeth.
No, Kwame Nkrumah, all those leaders that I named from the past weren't put in.
I'm telling you, man.
Position of power.
I'm telling you, these people are selected, bro.
Okay, you did.
Like the president of the United States is not elected.
Oh, okay, fellas, hold on, gentlemen, folks. YouTube.com/reality show. We got Real Talk, Black Boy King, Black Dollars. We are getting deep into this Hebrew Israelite, and now we done moved over to Pan-Africanism. Before I go back to you, brothers, let me get my man Ye in here. Ye's been waiting patiently, listening to what's going on with these gentlemen. We are now with the Pan-Africanism conversation. Ye, how you feel about what you're hearing in regards to the Pan-Africanism part of this thing, man?
Man, this is a lot.
Lot to absorb, right? I mean, in the beginning, Real Talk did its thing, man, and but now we're starting to see some of these differences, which is really what I wanted to hear. I wanted to get into this part, so because both of these dudes are studied, both of them seem to be students of certain parts of history, and it's interesting to see this dynamic. But what do you feel like, with what you're hearing from these brothers?
Well, I'm definitely not throwing away Pan-Africanism. But I'm definitely taking in Real Talk's information as well. And I'm just wondering how we as a people can connect all of this and not throw away the other side. You posed a question about Pan-Africanism in this current era. And Della brought up a good point about leadership. There's a lack of leadership. It's not working because the leadership was taken out. I mean, that says something big to me that that leadership was specifically taken out. There must have been some kind of power behind that leadership.
Exactly.
This is a threat. This leadership right here got to go. So, but I mean, hey, they're in the ring boxing it out. Let them box it out. You know what I'm saying?
But that's because I said, the secondary topic I was bringing up was the biblical aspect. When the God of Abraham says he is going to do something, it's final. The same way he said he will send us into slavery on them ships and we would serve our enemies. We did that. We went on them ships and we're serving our enemy to this day. We don't have no economic might in our hand. We got billionaire rappers and billionaire businessmen, but the African American economic community is still at the bottom. And that's because that is spiritual. That is a power, is a force. And the difference between us and the enemy is the enemy has their power in Satan, and they know how to take that power and enact control over the rest of the masses of people. What happened with us is we had our power in the God of Abraham, and we rejected him, then we forgot him, which is what's brought us to this low state to where when we do try to have movements like Pan-Africanism, which again, I'm not bagging on Pan-Africanism. What I'm saying about it is that it's a misguided, naive approach based on lack of understanding on the global construct that we live in. So Could we all come together and be one? Great, that would be awesome. But is that going to happen considering what we're dealing with is in our terms of our enemy right now? No, because the enemy has.
Okay, so let me ask you, what do you mean when you say us all coming together being one? What do you mean when you say?
What I'm saying is this, right? So the scriptures tell of a time, and G, I showed you these scriptures, and we're witnessing this right now, where the other nations of people and the other religions of the world are going to see the God of Abraham, and they're going to realize, yo. What, and I sent you that scripture that says we have been taught lies. It specifically says that in the Bible, that the other nations of people will say, wow, we have been taught lies by our forefathers. The God of Abraham is real, and you are the people. Let's go with you. We're going to go with you wherever you're going. So when this event happens, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, however long we got to suffer out this.
Young nigga, I cannot lose. I'ma keep grinding till I get some Jimmy Choo. Don't even worry about